They said the Montana Badlands did not just hide secrets, they buried them deep. For 3 long years, 2 boys were gone without a trace. Tyler and Cole Brennan vanished like smoke, leaving behind a mother who stopped sleeping and a case file no one opened anymore. People said the land took them. People said it was over. Everyone believed that story. Everyone except a quiet old rancher and a horse no one wanted. The heat that day was cruel. It did not rest on the land. It hunted it. The air smelled of dry sage and burned dirt. Frank Calloway stood by the north fence of his ranch, one gloved hand on a cedar post that had been dry for years. At 67, Frank moved slow and careful. Every step had a reason. Wasted motion meant wasted strength, and strength was something he did not have to spare. This fence line was part of his routine: wire, posts, silence. The kind of work that kept memories away. Since his wife Martha faded into sickness and then into death, routine was the only thing that kept him steady. She had forgotten him before she died, forgotten his name, forgotten their life. That taught Frank a hard truth. Feelings could not be trusted. Only solid things lasted. He turned toward his horse. Dakota stood nearby, tail flicking at flies, a big bay gelding with no shine left in his coat. Strong, quiet, plain. Frank bought him 3 years earlier at a livestock auction. Paid $400. The horse was thin then, standing in the pen marked for the meat buyer. Dakota had not begged. He had not feared. He just waited. Frank liked that. They had an understanding. Frank fed him. Dakota worked. No petting, no soft words. Just miles and dust. Frank swung into the saddle and pointed Dakota toward the Little Knife River, or what used to be the river. In 40 years, Frank had never seen it dry. But the drought did not care about history. The river was dead now, just cracked mud and broken banks. They rode down into the riverbed where Frank planned to string a wire. Cattle wandered too far when they were thirsty, and he did not have the patience to chase them. Dakota picked his way down the slope without trouble, but when they reached the flat, gray mud at the bottom, the horse stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Frank frowned and pressed his heels lightly. Walk on. Dakota did not move. His head lifted, his ears locked forward. His body went tight, not with fear, but with focus. Frank felt it through the saddle. This was not stubbornness. This was something else. Don't start, Frank muttered. Dakota blew hard through his nose and took one step, then another, not forward, sideways, toward the canyon wall. Frank pulled the reins. Dakota pulled back. That had never happened before. The horse moved with purpose now, dragging Frank toward a pile of old driftwood and dead brush packed against the bank. Junk left behind from floods years ago. Frank's heart picked up. He scanned the ground, thinking snake. His hand brushed the pistol at his side. Dakota did not shy away. He walked straight to the pile and stopped. Then he curled his lip and breathed in deep, holding the scent. His body trembled. Then he pawed. Hard. Dust flew. The sound echoed in the empty riverbed. Frank slid out of the saddle, pain shooting through his knee. Stop it, he snapped, grabbing the reins. You'll hurt yourself. Dakota shoved back, strong, determined. He pawed again, digging into the baked mud. That was when Frank saw it. A flash of blue in the dirt. Frank stepped forward, heart pounding. He crouched and reached into the loose soil, his fingers closed around canvas. He pulled. A small sneaker came free. Blue, faded, child-sized. The laces were tied tight, double-knotted. Frank stared at it. A knot like that was done with care. A parent did that. Not water, not time. This shoe had been buried, not washed in. Cold ran through Frank's chest, cutting through the heat. He looked up at Dakota. The horse stood frozen, eyes locked on the hole, shaking. Breathing fast. like he had found something that mattered more than fear. Frank reached for his radio. "Sheriff," he said, voice rough, "this is Calloway. You need to come out to the North Fork. Bring dogs. Bring shovels." Hours later, the sun dropped low. Deputies arrived. Dogs panted and circled. Sheriff Martin Holloway wiped sweat from his face and shook his head. "The dogs aren't hitting," he said. "Too hot. Too much dust." Frank held out the shoe. "That was buried." Holloway sighed. "Could have been there years. Flood trash." Dakota stood tied nearby, eyes never leaving the pile. He would not drink, would not eat. "My horse says there's something there," Frank said. Holloway rubbed his face. "Frank, it's a horse." Frank did not argue. When the sheriff called it for the night, Frank stayed. He grabbed a shovel and went to the driftwood. The pile was wrong. Too neat. Too tight. He struck a mud-covered log. It sounded hollow. Frank kicked again. Mud broke away. Plywood stared back at him. Not wood, not nature. A wall. Behind it, darkness. Holloway stepped forward fast. A flashlight snapped on. Inside the old concrete culvert, the beam caught silver foil. Then, movement. Two shapes. Two boys. Dirty, thin, alive. The older one stepped forward, holding a sharpened stick with shaking hands. "Don't shoot," the boy said. "My dad is coming back." Frank forgot how to breathe. Behind him, Dakota stood tall, ears forward, staring into the dark like he had finally found what he was waiting for. And everything was about to change. The silence broke all at once. Radios crackled. Boots scraped rock. Flashlights cut sharp lines through the dark culvert. The two boys stood frozen in the beam, blinking like animals pulled from a den. The older one planted himself in front, gripping the stick with both hands. His body shook, but his eyes burned with warning. "Stay back," the boy said. His voice sounded thin and unused. "My dad said no one can come near us." Sheriff Holloway lifted his hands and took a slow step back. He spoke soft, like talking to a spooked calf. He told the deputies to lower their weapons. No one moved forward. The younger boy was curled behind his brother, silent tears cutting clean lines through the dirt on his face. Frank stood off to the side, heart pounding. He felt useless. He had found them, but he did not know how to reach them. The uniforms only made it worse. The boys saw danger in every badge. Then the older boy's eyes shifted. They passed over the deputies, over the lights, over the guns. They landed on Dakota. The horse stood a short distance away, still a stone. His ears were forward, his body relaxed in a way Frank had never seen. He did not paw, he did not pull, he simply watched. The boy took one step out of the culvert. "Rusty," he whispered. Frank felt the word hit him like a blow. The boy dropped the stick. He walked forward, slow and unsure. The deputies held their breath. No one stopped him. Dakota lowered his head and breathed out softly. Warm air stirred the boy's hair. The child reached out and touched the horse's nose. His knees buckled. He pressed his face into the horse's neck and cried like something inside him had finally broken open. The younger boy followed. He clung to his brother's shirt and then to the horse's leg, hiding his face. That was enough. The deputies moved carefully. Blankets came out. Water. Gentle hands. The boys went with them at last, looking back again and again at the horse until they were loaded into the ambulance. Frank watched it all without moving. He realized then that Dakota had never belonged to him. He had only been holding the horse for someone else. At the hospital, the lights were harsh and white. Frank sat alone with a cup of cold coffee. The smell of cleaner pulling old memories from deep places. Sheriff Holloway joined him. Shoulders slumped. "We confirmed it," the sheriff said. "Tyler and Cole Brennan, missing 3 years." Frank nodded. "Kidnapped." "By their stepfather," Holloway said. "Glenn Brennan. He believed the system was coming for them. He hid them to save them. That's what he told himself." Frank said nothing. "The boys think he's their protector," the sheriff continued. They think their mother is dead." The words landed heavy. A woman rushed into the hospital then. She looked small and worn, like someone who had carried grief too long. When she was told her sons were alive, her body folded. No joy, just release. Frank did not watch the reunion. He knew that pain. Loving someone who no longer knew you was a wound that never closed. "They say the man is coming tonight," Holloway said quietly. "The boys said he brings supplies after dark." Frank stood. "I'm going back to the ranch." "It's a crime scene," the sheriff said. "It's my land," Frank replied. "And my horse is still there." That night, the moon was thin and sharp. Deputies hid along the riverbed. Frank waited on his porch, rifle nearby. Dakota paced the corral, restless. He kept calling out toward the dark, high and sharp. Just after 2 a.m, the radio cracked. "Truck spotted." Turning off the highway. Frank stood and watched headlights bounce across his pasture. The truck did not slow. It left the road and cut straight toward the river. "He sees us," someone shouted. "He's running." The lights swerved. Metal screamed. The truck vanished into a dry wash with a violent crash. Frank did not think. He ran for Dakota. He climbed on bareback and pointed him toward the sound. The horse leapt forward, fast and sure, carrying Frank through sage and shadow toward what waited ahead. Dakota reached the crash before the sirens did. The semi-truck lay on its side in the wash, steam hissing into the cold night air. Metal groaned as it cooled. Frank slid off the horse with the rifle in his hands and moved slow. A man stumbled out of the cab, big, bleeding, shaking. Glenn Brennan did not run toward Frank. He ran toward the river, toward the place where his world had lived for 3 years. "They safe?" Glenn cried. "Please tell me they safe." He dropped to his knees in the dirt 10 feet from the rifle barrel. His hands were empty. His face was wrecked with fear and grief, not anger. Frank had killed men in his youth. He knew the difference. Dakota stepped forward before Frank could stop him. The horse lowered his head and nudged the man's shoulder. Glenn looked up, eyes wide. "Rusty," he whispered. He grabbed the horse's legs and pressed his face into them, sobbing. The sound was raw and broken. Dakota did not move. He stood solid, offering weight and warmth, holding the man up when nothing else could. Frank lowered the rifle. "They're alive," Frank said. "They're safe. But it's over." Sirens grew louder. Glenn did not resist when the deputies arrived. He held onto the horse until they pulled him away. The days that followed were loud and crowded. News trucks came. Reporters asked questions. Frank turned them away. He fixed fence. He worked until his hands ached. Silence returned slowly, but it felt different now. Not empty, just waiting. One evening, Frank went through his old paperwork. He found the auction slip from 3 years ago. Lot 42, Bay Gelding. Consigned by S. Brennan. Sarah Brennan. Frank sat back and remembered the woman crying in the auction stands. Remembered how he did not look twice. He had been lost in his own pain then. Dakota had not forgotten. The smell of the shoe had brought back the boy. Not magic, memory. The next morning, Frank loaded Dakota into the trailer and drove into town. The Brennans were staying in a small rental house. Temporary, fragile. When Frank lowered the ramp, Tyler appeared at the door. He froze when he saw the horse. "Rusty!" He breathed. The boy ran and wrapped his arms around Dakota's neck. The horse lowered his head and leaned into him, letting out a deep, calm sound that seemed to settle the air around them. Sarah stepped forward, tears on her face. "We can't afford him," she said softly. Frank shook his head. "He's not mine." He placed the lead rope in her hand. "I was just keeping him safe," Frank said. "He belongs with your boy." 6 months later, spring came fast. The river ran again, loud and brown, washing away the scars of drought. The culvert was gone, filled and buried for good. Frank stood on the bank with Sarah. In the pasture, Tyler rode Dakota hard and happy. Cole followed on an old mare, laughing as they splashed through mud. They were not fixed. Frank knew that, but they were moving forward. Tyler pulled up near the fence. "Do you think he knew?" the boy asked. "That day." Frank looked at the horse and the river and the green grass pushing up through old dirt. "Some things don't forget," he said, "even when the world tries to bury them." Dakota lowered his head and grazed. The river kept flowing. And for the first time in a long while, Frank felt like the land was breathing again.